Let's start with a couple of questions. More than a couple, 4. What do you think, true or false? It's hard to get a project team to work together. Projects would be better if we utilize our resources completely. If we start the project sooner, you'll finish it sooner. And planning is the key to project success. So, which of the statements are true? And it's not, you can say all are true or none are true, or 1 or 2 of them are true. So I'm watching you voting. Well, I can't see who exactly is voting for what. I can see the gross numbers of what people are doing, but I can't see exactly what you're doing. All right, I've got 63%, 70%. 70%, we'll give you a couple more, maybe 12 seconds, 10 seconds, and then we'll close the poll and show the results. All right, the poll is closed. So here are the results. So 43, nearly half of you say that it's hard to get people to work together. Projects would be better if we keep everybody busy. Only 8% believe that if you start sooner, you'll finish sooner. 48% planning is the key, and 36% none. So what we're going to do in this presentation is explore each one of these statements for validity and see, so you can compare your results to what I think the results should be. Here's what I want to talk about. First of all, successful projects are rare. Why projects are unsuccessful, and a path forward. Now, just a couple of things. The first thing I want you to understand is that project failures are commonplace. According to this research done by the Standish Group, nearly 40% of large projects failed. In PricewaterhouseCoopers did a survey here recently, 10,000 projects, 200 companies, 30 countries, and various industries, so it's not just IT. And he says, they said only 2.5% of the companies successfully completed 100% of their projects. Harvard Business Review said that the average cost overrun of projects was 27%, but 1 in 6 had a cost overrun of 200 and a schedule overrun of almost 70%. So that's about 15%. When projects go bad, they go really bad. Now, what Gallup says is that projects often fail because organizations put too much emphasis on the rational factors, and of course the cost is, rather than employee psychological engagement, of course then the cost is very high. Now, the thing I want to emphasize here is that when you emphasize procedures and control, compliance becomes a substitute for results. Now, don't forget that projects is not about things, it's not about procedures or risk. Managing projects and successful project management is about people. Now, I'm going to give you another poll here, if I can get my cursor to work right, which I'm certain that I'm able to do. What I'd like to know is, what is the biggest challenge that you have in your projects right now? What is the biggest challenge out of these things? So we'll do about a minute to do this poll. Great, thank you for voting. Got about 70%, 73%. So about 20 more seconds. You're probably thinking, they're all a challenge. All right, 3 more seconds. And we're going to close the poll. And here's the results. So many of you do not like surprises. Surprisingly, I'm surprised that that only 15% have too many meetings cited, but still 15% is still a problem because when you're in meetings, you're not doing the work. 22% getting the right or enough, 11% are late, and then 4% none of the above. Okay, well, good. So we're going to come back to that and talk about why are projects late. Now imagine you are the new director of engineering and you are doing multiple projects. Here is your office area. You walk in, this is what you see. So what's the status of the work that's being done in your office? And of course, it's hard to know. I mean, you can walk down the hallway and you can see people not on Facebook or on discussion groups, but they're busy working on engineering work, of course, and talking about engineering work, of course. But the truth is, you're walking down this hallway, and this is your team. You really have no idea what these people are doing or what the status is. It's or you may have some idea or a rough idea. With the lack of visibility into the process, you don't know where the problems are, where do I focus, what to prioritize, and whether or not projects are on time or not, right? Unless they're already late, and then of course everyone knows that they're late. The big thing in projects, when we think about projects, that the biggest problem that we see is the project teams simply do not have situational visibility. They can't see where they are, and they can't see clearly what to do. So what do? They have a meeting, and we have another meeting, and then another meeting to try and figure out where we are and what's going on in the project and what do we need to do. So this is the main thing that we see in terms of getting leverage. So there are 3 keys to getting visibility. One of them is collaboration. 2 is alignment of the team, and then controlling the work in process. And I'm using WIP as an example, as the abbreviation here. Now, let's talk about the first thing, collaboration. Now, think about the project meeting that you were at earlier this week, or maybe you were at multiple project team meetings. Think about what was happening in these meetings, right? What we see is when we come into an organization that there's a lot of protecting behavior, a lot of reasons why things aren't quite working out. People are defending their original promise and saying, well, I wouldn't have been late if this guy had given me this information, or I don't have this information, or my favorite one is, well, the customer changed their mind. They're always, the project teams and the project team meetings that spend so much time giving the reasons why things haven't worked out and what are they doing about it and how can we make things better, that they spend all of their time talking about what has happened and very little time on what is going to happen. So there's not a lot of collaboration going on. Secondly, when we look at project teams, we find that the people on project teams rarely have the same goal. I mean, there's one guy who has the goal of getting the project done, one guy, and that is the project manager. And somehow he has to take this team of people that have been given to him to execute this project and somehow get these people lined up. But this is where he spends all of his time, or she spends all of her time. You think about the people that are on the project team. You've got the person who is managing resources, and they want to keep everybody busy, because if they don't keep people busy, then they will lose their resources. And then there are the people that say, well, we have to earn the hours. If we don't earn the hours, then we don't show progress and we can't get paid. And then we have the controller, and he's saying, well, we've got to comply to the budget. You've only earned this much, so you can only spend this much. And that particular expenditure is not on the budget. And then, of course, there's the what we'll call the interpersonal behaviors, the people that are on a project because it's highly visible, they want to get promoted. And then there's everyone else that are just trying to get by and avoid punishment in the project. So we have all of these people on the team that are really not working towards the same objective. And it doesn't have to be like that. So let's talk a little bit about what the myths are, right? And the first one is to finish early, one should start early. Now, this is something that we generally believe. The sooner I start, the sooner I finish. And we think that if the system is performing poorly, what we need to do is get more time to get the work done. But the problem is that everybody starts early. And of course, the system gets loaded up with work. And oh, by the way, there you are in the lower corner there, trying to sort this mess out. If you think about the work a lot of the work that happens in a project is sorting. It's what's the most important thing, what's the least most important thing, and oh yes, I know I told you to do that, but now you have to do this. The system just gets clogged up with work, and of course that creates a lot of confusion about what do I need to do, and it causes you to lose capacity. Tasks get worked out of sequence. And then, of course, there's the classic one in terms of rework. People start a task and they can't finish it because they don't have all the information, or they start something and they get better information later and they have to go back and do it. And all this unplanned work is not in anybody's project plan. It's not in the resource plan. And so it's no wonder that things are going to take longer and are going to go over budget, because there's this hidden work in the project that is there, but people don't really see it. And it creates this activity we call multitasking, this task switching. And this task switching adds even more time, right? So here's 3 tasks where we've got a setup time and a run time and a setup time and a run time. We've got 3 different tasks with 3 different setup times. And if we break this up into just 3 and divide it into, or let's say we divide it up into 2, divide each task into 2, and we work one day on task 1, one part on task 2, one part on task 3, we would see that task 1 does not finish in 12 days, it finishes in 28. And task 2 doesn't finish in 24 days, it finishes in 35. And task 3 doesn't finish at the end of day 36, it completes at day 42. This task switching and of course this is just best case, right? This assumes that there's no sequence mistakes and everybody works the sequence just perfectly, and there's no additional setup time, there's no rework. The multitasking adds time. There's no such thing as good multitasking or bad multitasking. Multitasking is just bad. Now, multitasking is not parallel tasking, but when we're talking about multitasking here, we're talking about task switching. And this is another source of additional work that is generally not seen in projects. It's invisible. And we know that when we take a guy or a gal off of a resource or off of a task, we know that there's going to be some time for them to kind of get their head around where they were when they picked up the task last time. And there is setup time in knowledge work. And in knowledge work is where we see the greatest impact. Manufacturing, they've got this down perfectly, but for some reason in knowledge work, we don't. So this multitasking creates additional work. Now, when we think about what the conventional approach to projects. And like I was showing you earlier, projects have been going wrong for a long time, and it's across cultures and it's across industries. So it's not just your company that is having this problem. Everybody's having this problem. And if we look at what the conventional approach, the solutions that are out there that are handed to project managers, they're all centered around making a good plan, right? And the assumption is if I make a good plan and then I can execute that plan and then, everybody goes to heaven and we're going to be great. But the truth is, the evidence shows that the conventional approach simply does not work. So what we need to do is rethink the conventional approach and try something else. Now, I liken the project plan to a map. So imagine you're going to take a trip. All right. Now, you don't have a vehicle. You don't have a transportation mechanism. What do you need first? Do you need the map or do you need the car? Which do you need first? And of course, the point is, having a map does no good unless you have a vehicle or a car to get there. So everybody says, well, I have a car. Well, here's your car. Now, this isn't addressing you specifically, but we know that the pieces are there. They're just not put together. So what we really want to think about is changing the approach from planning first and starting with figuring out how can we execute first. Now, the first thing that we have to do is get control of the work, because there can be no improvement in the process while the team is expediting. Now, you're not going to get any mind space from anybody on project performance or improving, or try and organize a planning event. Okay, I'm looking at our attendee list, all right, and you think about how difficult it is to get a planning event. Everybody's too busy doing the work. So as long as everybody's too busy doing the work, there can't be any space. So the first thing we have to do is get control of the work and focus on the execution behaviors. Then, if we execute well, that will release the capacity into the system and will allow the team to take a step back and use the structure or the capacity for proper planning. Now, I have another poll for you. Where do you think you are on execution? How well does your team execute? So I'm going to use this poll later in the presentation. So please take a minute and check the poll. I'm waiting for somebody to answer that last one there. Okay, about 20 more seconds. About 80% of you have voted. At least, okay, 4 or 5 seconds. All right, last chance. All right, poll is closing. So here's the results. So when we look at 17% ad hoc, 45% have expectations but you're inconsistent, 21%, that's pretty high. All projects are managed using the consistent process, and nobody says, I wish I was good. I was surprised by that. All right, so we're going to continue with I'll come back to this in a bit. Now, there are three keys, right? The first one is get visibility into the process so you can improve teamwork and collaboration. Second, create alignment in the team by creating a common goal, a common destination. And third, manage the work in the system, control the flow. So I'm going to talk about each one in turn. So collaboration and execution, all right? When we think about collaboration, what we mean is the team is focused on the future, working towards a common goal. They're engaging in the process of managing the project, right? That means they actually come to the meetings. Individuals will subordinate their personal goals to the goals of the project, and there's consistent work to improve the process. So when we talk about collaboration, we're talking about these 4 things. Now, to build collaboration, the first thing that we have to do is we have to have a shared assessment of what the situation is. All right, so we can stop arguing about, is this a situation or is that a situation? What's the risk and so forth, which consumes so much energy in a project team. We have to make sure that we've got the right people, the people who are accountable for solving the process, or solving problems. If it's a lead engineer or if it's the supply chain guy or the purchasing guy, whatever, make sure we get the right people in the room. And then finally, they're actually doing things. They're acting to achieve the goal of the project. All right, so this is what we talk about collaboration. So I like to use the example of a football team. All right, everyone is on the pitch. All right, they can see the players, they can see the balls, they understand what they need to do. Everybody has a clear accountability of where they should be in the field, and they all have the same goal of putting the ball in the net more time than the other guy. But that's not how our project teams work. So what we want to do is get our project teams to work more like a real team, working together to achieve that goal. Now, in order to do that, because projects are kind of complicated and, there's a lot of stuff that's invisible. I mean, you've got information that's in people's heads, you've got pieces, it's in the computer, it's on people's desks, how do you get it? So we have to have an obvious situation. It has to be accurate, meaning it has to be some reasonable, what do I want to say, a reasonable facsimile of where we are. And we all have to agree that this is the true situation. So what we do is we make these visual boards, right? This is a simple board. You can see that it's got swim lanes and it's got rows that indicate different kinds of value streams, and it has columns that indicate different steps in the process. In this particular board you're looking at, this is a project portfolio of about 400, 500 projects, about 500 different engineers. So we're managing portfolios, and I'm trying to think how many customers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 different customers that we're doing. This is probably the biggest board we've ever created. It was about 35 feet long. This is a really complex one. Here's a simpler one. And you can see this is really, it's just Post-it notes, right? The intention here is not to build something that's really pretty or complex or sophisticated, but it's something that is meaningful for the project team. So in the other board you saw, in this board you see that work is represented by a card. So a card is a work package. In this one, the work packages are actually the rows, and the Post-it notes that turn blue indicate progress in the process. And in this process, they're managing a manufacturing process and they're managing an engineering process. Now, so once we have a visual representation of what the board is like, then we can move into actually engaging the team to work on the right thing. So you'll notice these people are all standing in the hallway, and that is by design. There's no chairs. These meetings are very quick, short, 15 minutes. Here's another version. You can see it's not really sophisticated. You can't really see it, but he's looking at Post-it notes down the hall there. There's an electronic version. Here's another version of that board. The point is that once you have a visualization of the process, once you have a visualization of the work, then people can get engaged in solving problems rather than arguing about whose fault it is. And the big thing that they're doing is they're accelerating flow. All right, and we use a thing called a red dot report. So if something gets stuck, it gets a red dot, and then this becomes the focal point for the teams. How do we get stuff unstuck to move the process forward so they start to collaborate and actually will do what they're supposed to do? So this is the first thing. Building collaboration. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't need a sophisticated software to do this, but you do need to have a common understanding of what the project is, where's the work, what are the issues. And that is really all you need to do. Now, once we've got that going, then we've got to get people aligned, all right? So if you think about what we're trying to do in projects, the project manager are at the core influencers of behavior, right? Everything that needs to be done is done by people, and the managers or the project managers are exerting influence to increase some behavior, decrease some behavior, initiate some behavior, stop some behaviors. And whether you're improving quality or increasing productivity, it's the behavior that drives progress. Now, Aubrey Daniels, the famous behavioral psychologist, said that people do what they do because of what happens to them when they do that, when they do it. So, in other words, behavior is a function of consequences. So you don't have to get into people's head and figure out their motivation for things, right? Often when we look at something, we ask, well, why did somebody do that, all right? Was it some kind of an internal force? Was it a drive, a need, a desire, or was there some external thing or a signal that they got? That is not important. What behaviorists do is they look for the behavior, all right? And they look for the consequence of the behavior. What happens after they do the behavior? See, we don't care what's in people's minds. We care about what they do. Now, Goldratt said, show me how you measure me, and I'll show you how I behave. And if you measure me in an irrational way, don't complain about my irrational behavior. So Goldratt hit on the idea that measurements are a shortcut to managing consequences. So if we can control the measurements drive the consequences then drive the behavior. So if I'm going to set up some kind of a measurement system, if I'm going to get some people to do things in a certain way, the first question is, well, what do I want them to do, right? So this is really about, setting the goals. So what do we want our people to do? What we want them to do is we want them to move the project to completion as fast as possible. Why? Because that's when we get paid. So we want to make sure that the project duration is as short as possible as our main objective, while we don't violate any of the necessary conditions of budget or scope, right, or safety or whatever that is, right, that we're trying to do. Now, the question is, what behavior do we want that will move the project? So this is the next thing. So what we do is we create metrics that are behavior driven. Now here's just a handful. These are just nominal. These are ones that we do in all of our projects, but they aren't necessarily the best ones or the worst ones, but we focus on work package movement. We focus on completions. We focus on, do people fix problems as soon as they're identified? Do they escalate if they get stuck, right? Do they execute in a way to avoid problems, right? So we can actually identify whether people are doing that by these different metrics, and we can determine what's good or not. Now, this tells us about the process and the people who are working in the project, and are they doing the right things. The second thing, though, is how do I govern this process? Now, this is a different kind. This is more of the traditional KPI guys, but they're all backward looking, right? And they ask a different set of questions. They want to know, am I completing more projects, all right? So I can look at my throughput by month. I can do my trend analysis. As long as my throughput is going up every month, I'm good. I don't have to intervene in the process. The second thing is engineering is the lead time going down, all right? Am I getting more done in less time? Because remember, the goal is to get the projects done as quickly as possible. So these two metrics give us a sense of how well is our process doing, right? So if I have all of the projects, these are two metrics that I need to know to determine whether or not my process is under control. And then I can do a Pareto analysis of the areas in the process that are creating the most problems. And this tells me where do I need to focus to move the process. So we have two sets of metrics that are driving different kinds of behavior. One kind of metric is driving the day-to-day doing the project kind of behavior. And then I have another set of metrics that are driving good governance kinds of behavior, because we are not going to get any progress unless we have both good governance and good behavior at the local level. So this is the second thing. By creating a aligned set of measurements, what we do is we bring everybody into line in terms of what the goal is and what the expected behavior is and what the reinforcements are going to be in the project. Now, the third item, managing flow. All right? So again, the objective of your system is to make things go fast, right? So flow has to be your number one consideration, all right? And of course, the target is not how many projects you start to work on, but how many projects you get completed. Now, a critical element in flow is understanding how flow works and understanding the nature of the work process. The constraint sets the flow, the rate for the entire system. So if you think about how projects are done, right, there's a sequence that has to happen in order for the project to be completed successfully. And you can't do step 2 until you've done step 1, and you can't do step 6 until you've done steps 1 through 5. And there is some dependency on tasks. And we also know that resources are not limited or unlimited. We know that we don't have an infinite supply of senior engineers or senior software developers or whatever the key resource is. So therefore, we can think of our system like a chain, right? It's like a chain. And we know that what determines the strength of the chain is its weakest link. And how many weakest links are there? Of course, there's only one weakest link. So the key for managing flow is understanding where is that weakest link? Where is the constraint in my process? If I don't know the constraint in my process, then I am not able to increase the velocity. So what we want to be able to do is we want to get the team to focus their efforts around identifying and eliminating the bottlenecks and focusing their efforts to increase the velocity. So if we think about, if I break the weakest link, I'm still going to have another one, and then another one, and then another one. But each time the chain gets stronger. So the same thing happens in your project. Every time that you break a bottleneck, the velocity increases. And these velocity increases are small wins that are built in your project. So it's not, so if we go back to the sports analogy, breaking the bottleneck is analogous to scoring a goal. All right, everybody scores a goal, everybody gets excited, we scored, we're winning, and what we're doing is working, but we still haven't won the game. So having this process in place to continue to break the bottlenecks, identify and break, builds momentum in the project and the project goes faster and faster and faster. So, 3 things: controlling WIP, building collaboration, and aligning the goal. Now, the question is, how do you do it? So it's not hard. Here's our car, right? What we've done is we've created this thing we call the execution maturity model. And the execution maturity model essentially identifies the different execution behaviors that are required to execute successfully and quickly. And we broke them into 3 levels, right? The first level we call basic collaboration. This is where everybody should be, all right? This is basic process behavior. Then once you've mastered that, you can move into improved coordination, right, which is maybe more sophisticated. And then at the highest level, the fastest car is in integrated planning and execution. And if you think about how most project management solutions try to start you off in the blue boxes before you've got the green boxes under control. So what we're suggesting is that you start with the green, and then the orange, and then the blue. So I want to talk about each one here. Basic collaboration. Let's just talk about this. This is a basic step, the first step. This is, can we manage the work that's in front of us? The work that's already in the system, the work that is near term. The team that is in my local work area, or the team that I have control over. The emphasis here is on velocity. And we're trying to get collaborative execution. We're getting people to work together. We're managing priorities effectively. We're not switching priorities every day, and you know what that's like. We're doing the metrics. We're getting people lined up, and we're controlling the WIP. We're not starting stuff that we can't finish. We're not pushing too much work into the system. Now, once we've mastered these 4 basic processes, then we can move into improved coordination, and we can start taking our collaboration behaviors that we've mastered in the local group, and we can start reaching into other organizations. This is the remote collaboration. We can start systematically identifying and breaking bottlenecks. We can start thinking about schedule. We can start thinking about dates and promising and delivering reliably. So the first section is, or the first level of maturity is based on velocity. Here we're talking about moving into, not only are we going to go fast, but we're going to go fast and we're going to hit the dates that we promise. And when I talk about dates, I'm not talking about task dates. I'm talking about milestones and delivery dates. This is the concentration that we have here. Now, once we've managed these or mastered these tasks or these processes, then we can move into integrated planning and execution, and we can do much more sophisticated things. We can implement critical chain and do probabilistic planning and scheduling. We can get into the details and build a sophisticated information system where we're managing all the tasks in the project, and we're getting really good detailed resource pools and those kinds of things. Now, we can extend our time reach beyond what's in the system to what's the full portfolio. We can start to do more sophisticated things. So you can see that the execution maturity takes us from very basic things to more intermediate things to much more advanced things. Oh, I forgot to mention the subcontractor thing. So this is, again, about reaching in to organizations that we don't have direct control over, but we have influence over, and assessing supply chain risk. Not everybody has that one, which is why I have it over on the right. Now, what is your execution maturity, right? So we can show you what is your execution maturity. There it is right there. So you can tell you that I cannot read all this, all right? So most of you are kind of in the, well, I don't know, we say about 60% of you are in what I would call the lower levels of execution, and 15%, you've got some objectives. So you can see, like, you've got your collaboration, see 17% are doing okay. Your processes are working okay, right? So there's still an opportunity for you. Now, here's the good news. When we implement the various levels of execution maturity, when we get into the basic collaboration, we can take a team of, I don't know, we'll call it 100 people that are in a local area, and we can get them all the way from wherever they are into that basic collaboration in about 90 days. And there's a huge amount of business value that's created. And then when we move on into improved coordination through remote collaboration and managing the bottlenecks and so forth, you get another bump in business value, and so on and so on. So my expectation is that every organization, if projects are part of your business, you should be at least at the basic collaboration, at least at the basic collaboration phase of the project. Now, when we look at our implementations, and we've been doing this now, we've been using this process for, I don't know, 2 years. I think we've been doing this. We've probably done it 25 or 30 times. This is one customer. We did about 4 projects. So actually, we've done more than one. This is a number of projects. But what I wanted to highlight here is, not the company necessarily, but look at the results that you can get by this is just moving up one level, right? Revenue increases of, this is what, $50 million in a small organization. Lead time reduction from 31 to 8 days, 300% increase in unit ship, 400%. These are not our numbers. These are our customers' numbers. These are, now I don't want to say, hey, if you do Viewpoint, you're going to get a 300% increase in shipments. You may only get 100%. Okay, well, still 100%, that's pretty good. So my point here is that the Viewpoint process and the execution maturity has been tested and has shown time and time again that it actually delivers the results. Here's another case. This says BP. This is an engineering organization. In 6 months, they increased their project throughput by 24% and saved $12 million, right? So it's not, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the scope, you can get big numbers on the board in a really short period of time. Now, why does project performance suffer? Well, the big thing is that they can't see, right? And because they can't see, they can't collaborate, right? They end up overloading the system with too much work in process, and their goals are conflicting. If we just fix these things, then there's massive opportunity for improvement in process. Now, here's some things that are practice, some things that you can do that are practical, all right? First of all, don't start as soon as possible, start as late as possible. Now, as late as possible means don't overload the system. You know where the constraint is? Find the constraint and then introduce the projects at the rate that the constraint can absorb it, the system can absorb it, all right? Now, most of the time when we go in, we find that there's a huge amount of work in process, way too much. So what we tell people is cut the number of projects that are in the portfolio by half, all right? So no, freeze the projects, don't start anything until you stop work on half, and then when you finish a project, start another one, and so forth. Make sure you've got one person that is going to decide on priorities. One person, one organization. Don't have, we had a project where we had some software engineers, and these poor software engineers were getting signals from their supervisor. They were getting signals from the department head. They were getting signals from the manufacturing organization. They were getting signals from the customers. The customers were calling the software engineer because they were having problems with their software. It was impossible for that guy, for those people to do the right thing, because no matter what they did, it was always the wrong thing. So always have one person that can sort that out. Have a gatekeeper, all right? Don't start unless you can finish it. All right. So one of the things that we do is we put a full kit kind of a process. So we don't launch anything into the system until we know that we have all the information that the resources can finish. So this is just some practical things. Now, I'm going to wrap up. I want to tell you a story, and then we'll go to your questions. All right. I want to tell you the story about a man named Larry. All right. Now, Larry's childhood dream was to fly. And when he graduated from high school, he joined the U.S. Air Force in the hopes of becoming a pilot. But sadly, he was unable to, right? And he had bad eyesight, basically. And oops. He and his girlfriend, they purchased 42 weather balloons and a helium tank, and they inflated the balloons and they tethered them to a lawn chair in the backyard of San Pedro, California. Right? So here's a close-up view of his chair, and see he's got ballast tanks and that kind of thing, and there he is actually flying. So he prepared some sandwiches, some soft drinks, got his CB radio, a camera, a pellet gun, all right, because, so he could shoot those balloons and descend softly. So he expected he would gently float up into the sky and then above his girlfriend's house, and then he would float around and have a Coke and a bologna sandwich, and then, he'd pop those balloons one at a time and then gracefully return to Earth. Well, things didn't quite turn out that way. When he cut the cords to the ground, Larry didn't ascend gently. Instead, he took off like a rocket, and it finally leveled off at a frigid altitude of 16,000 feet, which is, 4,800 meters. And at that point, the last thing that Larry wanted to do was to start shooting those balloons out. So finally, he drifted into the flight path of the Long Beach, California airport, where he was spotted by pilots from TWA and Delta. And you can just imagine, what the conversation was like between the pilots in the tower. The tower, we've spotted a man floating at 16,000 feet. He's eating a bologna sandwich. He's got a Diet Coke, and he has a gun. Well, so what happened is he did shoot some of those balloons, and he did begin to descend until he dropped his gun, right? And then at that point, he had to wait for the balloons to leak out in the air, and this makeshift aircraft had to descend on its own. And finally, he got caught in some power lines, and it created a 20-minute blackout. And of course, this is in the newspaper. You can go read all this. And he got arrested and was paid a fine of $1,500. And the media said, well, he was a folk hero. And when the reporters asked him, well, why did he do something? He said, well, a man just can't sit around. It was something I had to do, and I had this dream for 20 years, and if I hadn't done it, I think I would have ended up on the funny farm. I didn't think that by fulfilling my goal in life, my dream, that I would create such a stir and make people laugh. It was, a man just can't sit around. It was something I had to do. So, I want to leave you with that. All right? Don't be afraid to do something. I've given you a lot of information in this webinar, some things that you can do. A lot of people are worried about how they'll look, but I wouldn't worry about how you look. I would worry about the impact that you can have. And I can tell you just from personal experience that the things I've shared with you in this hour, these things will have an impact, and people's lives will be better. So go ahead and take a chance. Now, there are two things. All right. I'm going to send you this ebook that we have, Making Projects Visual, and you're going to get the first book. When we write about the execution maturity, I'll give you first crack at the ebook on explaining what the execution maturity model looks like. And the second thing, because you are watching the video or stayed on the webinar until this point, what I will do is I will do a tailored webinar for you and your team. All right, so that means that I can kind of tweak it a little bit just for you and at no charge at all. All right, and for those of you in Asia, I'll still do it for you too. I'll get up in the middle of the night and do it. So I want to say thank you